Senator Galloway, how are you?
It's good, good. Great to be here. So excited to visit with you.
You're the only person that if I had said Representative Galloway, I would have been forgiven because you were a representative for 2 years and now you're a senator.
Yes. And I would also probably correct you and say, hey, it's Cody. Really, it's Cody.
Dude, I'm good with Cody. I'm so bad. Like, I don't mean to be rude to people. It's so odd emailing somebody and being like, oh, Representative,
Yeah.
like Galloway. It's like, because I don't know. Perhaps I should be more formal. You're wearing like a suit too. Like I need to.
We have
up
to. It's
it.
not a choice. We have to.
All right. Well, listen, we're getting there. You were a representative over COVID, which was terrible, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like not a fun time, but you fought really hard to get kids back in school. That was like your big push. Help me understand that, because again, there were a lot of people that were like, we're pro kid, we're pro whatever, but they didn't put their necks out for it. So like, why is it that the representative that, obviously was in the West Ada school district, why was that such a big thing for you in that area?
Right. So I think it comes from my background. I have 4 kids, so I'm a mom. I also was an elementary school teacher and taught in the public school system for several years before I had my kids. And then I owned a private school, career technical education for adults. So I spent a lot of time in the education space. And I was so excited to run for office and go and work on great education priorities. When you start in the public schools and then move to private education, you can see all these lessons go back and forth.
Sure.
And suddenly, like all of these things that was happening in a government system, I thought, oh, they should be doing it this way. And this is so much easier. And our hours should be this. And you're seeing all these innovative ideas. And so I was really excited to share and work on some of those priorities that I had learned in the private sector and bring some of that business mindset into our schools to help improve them and be more innovative. And then I get elected and the schools aren't even open. Yeah. So I'm like, wait a minute.
Dude,
I can't improve education. I can't do all these wonderful things. I've got to just spend all my time trying to get the doors back open and get for in-person learning. And I know it was a difficult time. It was hard. There were lots of unknowns and decisions that were hard to make. And so I don't fault anyone for, doing the best with the information they had at that time. But I, on the other hand, had just been campaigning, knocking door to door. And it was interesting because when I'm in a really competitive district, probably the most competitive district in the state of Idaho. And I unseated an incumbent from the opposing party. So it was not an easy fight in that election. And I did it by going door to door. And amazingly, I was getting like 7 out of 10 doors answered, which never happens when you're a door knocker because people are at work, people are busy. But it was during COVID and people were home and they wanted to talk. And so I got a crash course and talked to thousands and thousands of people from a few feet back, standing at their doorstep, them standing in their house. And I saw some things that were really, really just honestly frightening to me. I saw little kids at home. I saw, 7 or 8-year-old kids watching 2-year-olds in soggy diapers, standing at the window with Cheeto bags and not answering the door because their mom had probably told them not to answer the door, but knowing that there was no one home in that house and they're looking out the window. And I'm like, I just saw our most vulnerable people being so underserved by remote education. And that was quite disturbing to me as I went door to door. And so I wanted to do something about it when I got to State House.
First off, I very much sympathize. Like 2020 had big plans. I think the world had big plans, right?
Yeah.
And that was a rough year. But coming back to what you just said at the end, there's an integration of technology that schools, the school industry nationally, both public and private, is kind of experiencing, where they're like, oh, we have this hammer, like we can hit everything with everything's a nail. Like we're going to use tech. It's going to be great. And remote education is a big piece. So people are like, oh, like we should figure out ways to educate our kids remotely. And seeing that play out the way it did, it's like, can we just have a discussion about working this back perhaps? Or like, can we acknowledge that this isn't the same thing? Because it isn't. When you talk about, kids being educated on remotely and the gross assumption that it's like, this will work out. It's like, it didn't work out. Like that was not a great time in like our educational history.
Absolutely. And I think that's common sense. Like most people, if you're a mom, if you're a teacher, I remember thinking, okay, and even the mask thing, that is maybe there may be some circumstances you can make a case for that, But as a former second grade teacher that can't pass out stickers without knowing that's going to be a distraction, the idea of putting masks on kindergartners and thinking those are going to stay on their mouth and not be in the mouth and in their hands. And there's just some practical
The mask thing was
applications
ridiculous,
that just, it seemed like we missed some common sense things. You don't give a 5-year-old a mask. You don't take kids out of school, especially our most vulnerable.
You don't put them on tech. Like this is the other thing. Like putting them on tech is just this ultimate distractor. One of my sons, who was obviously getting schooled remotely for a brief period of time, got in trouble because they found out there was like a chat bar and something, and they were like sending emojis, like poop emojis and stuff back and forth. And they were like, "Hey, you guys can't. Of course, you guys can't." Hey, they're looking at the screen, getting reprimanded. It's like, what do you expect? Anyway, like the conversation doesn't need to be about that dark time, but yeah, like you just took it back, where it's like the tech integration and the overutilization of tech, or like, hey, we can educate remotely. I'm like, yeah, I think adults can get educated remotely. Like I've taught myself a dump truck off YouTube. Like that's fine, but it doesn't really fly with 7-year-olds.
Yes. And a balance in all things. I mean, I have 2 kids in college right now, and they're taking a remote class. Probably one or two of their classes are remote, and then 4 or 5 are in-person classes at the college level. And that's probably good. It allows my son, he works 3 days a week and goes to school 3 days a week. So it allows some schedule flexibility. So there's definitely like pros to it. But we have to have choices and have balance in that. And yeah, little kiddos I just recently finished The Anxious Generation.
Great
read
book.
that. I mean, just so frightening what we do to our kids sometimes.
Yeah. Have you ever heard of the gal, the scrolling to death gal on Instagram?
No.
She's fantastic. She was actually on Fox recently, but she's really sounding the drum about tech safety and tech problems with kids. And she I believe met Jonathan Haidt and had some conversation with him, but it's really startling once you dig into it. We were talking beforehand about young people and the homeless population that actually exists within Boise. Nationally, homelessness is a problem in really select areas. And, there are a lot of conversations about why. It's like, well, you can't have homeless people where it's freezing. It's like, well, you have homeless people in Chicago. It's pretty cold in Chicago, You have a lot of homelessness problems on the West Coast. And there are even small things like small policy decisions that lead to different types of legislative practices and law enforcement practices that allow and perpetuate homeless problems, like just like parking on a street, or like owning a portion of sidewalk. Like if you put a tent down, you then like own the sidewalk. It's like I don't even own. I have to pay property tax on my house. I own my house, but I don't own my house. And like you just get this tent and you own the sidewalk then. So that's something that you were
for
saying
72 hours. You own it for 72 hours, and you have to move it 300 feet.
Oh my! Is that currently what it is in like Boise? You can stay there for 72 hours with personal property, then you have to move 300 feet?
Don't quote me on it, but I'm pretty sure that's accurate.
Okay, talk to me about this, because that just doesn't make sense to me.
The homeless problem is quite disconcerting. And again, it's the mother heart in me that goes back to the little children that I see out living in cars up and down the streets in Boise and in tents on sidewalks. It's pretty bad. In fact, it's interesting. In my campaign, this recent campaign, I talked to a lot of people, because a lot of people are looking for change in Boise. They feel like the shift has gone a direction that doesn't support Idaho values. And one of the results of that is a growing homeless population and growing crime, and people feeling less safe in a city that is just a record of being the best place to raise a family and the best place to live. And so anyways, I did this presentation during my campaign, and what I did was at the beginning, I showed a picture, and it was from the New York Times, and it was an article, and it had a headline that talked about the homeless encampments and the problems that they cause. And I said, I'm going to tell you a story, but I'm going to show you what happens at the end, at the beginning. They do that in movies sometimes. So I showed them the picture, and then I tell them the story and show them what's happening in Boise and how things have gotten to the point that they are. And I came back to the photo at the end, and I said, okay, now we're back to the end of my story. I showed you this at the beginning. Do you remember this photo? Everyone look at it really closely. And everyone started looking at it. And I said, does anyone notice anything about this photo? in the photo, I had just pulled the same text and headline from the New York Times article, but I put a picture of Boise in it. And I said, you all think this is coming. Portland is coming to Boise, but it is already here. This photo is your downtown Boise. We just haven't seen it, but it's there. And there's cars parked on streets and people living in tents and little children not going to school where they should be. And I wonder if they're warm at night. And it's one thing if adults want to do different things with their lives, but I'm not okay. Sure. I'm just not okay with little children in those situations. So,
and I don't think anybody could ever agree, especially with minors. And to the degree that we believe in freedom, like I think there are different versions of freedom that people experience throughout the United States. Like Portland, you're free to do a lot of things. Like you got a lot of freedom, right? And Idaho touts itself as being, a freedom-loving state, but freedom in Idaho means something completely different than freedom in, let's say, Portland. Mm-hmm. And even if you're an adult here, in the absence of minor or somebody you're responsible for, you don't have the freedom to just take over a downtown street. You don't have the freedom to just stay someplace indefinitely and defecate on the street. Like you don't have a freedom to be open, to have like an open drug scene. Like we don't.
Except for 72 hours.
Well, not the drug scene. The tent, yes, 72 hours.
And the defecating part, that happens too in Boise.
But is that something that is like tolerated?
You know what? Our police officers are phenomenal and they do a really good job, but the laws right now and the city ordinances allow people to set up camps and live in places and then move their vehicles not very far away. So yeah, it's a problem. I want to help those people get into shelters. I want to help them get treatment for mental illness. I want to help take care of those kids and make sure their kids are getting to schools. And I worry about what's happening on the streets there.
When we talk about helping people get into shelters, I had Reverend Bill Roscoe on with Boise Rescue Mission.
Amazing man.
He's great. Like unbelievable. We had an incredible conversation. And the difficulty with him is not difficulty, but the nuance with him is he has all these incredible programs and helps people. But one, he doesn't take any government money. Yeah. Right. And two,
that's not a problem. That's a good thing. That helps him be successful.
Right. And two, he has an ask of the participants. He's like, we will help you as long as it takes. That's the other thing. He doesn't have a cap on timing. Yeah. I was like, wait, so if it's a 6-month thing or like a 3-year thing, he's like, as long as people are making progress, we will stand by them. And I was like, wow, that's incredible. Because most people, like a dum-dum like me, I'm like, oh, well, like, of course, you can't like just let somebody hang out here for years. Like, well, you can if you're trying to help them and they're making progress. But his thing is like, you have to be sober. You can't use this just as lodging and you go out and go do drugs. Like you got to be working, and they have all these, integration jobs within it. But from a legislation standpoint, from a Senate standpoint, how do we Bill Roscoe is not taking government money. He's not, taking cues from the state government. So like, what is it that you think that the state government in Idaho could do to help get people in positions that they're recovering from these problems?
I think we look at what Bill Roscoe's doing and we say, good job. And then we help make sure and we realize that he's doing such a good job because he's doing it on his own without us, and we don't try to mess it up. And instead, what we do is, as a state government, we require less of our citizens via taxes, and we encourage them to individually donate to places that they know are going to help. Oftentimes in government, and I'm not saying, government does have a role to take care of the poor and indigent, but those populations, but in general, if we want more of what Bill Roscoe's doing, we have to help people understand. We can't take that responsibility and say, don't worry, we've collected your taxes, we're going to take care of the homeless people. What we need to do is we need to provide incentive so that people individually will donate to organizations like his and let them choose and let them invest in opportunities that they know are going to be successful with people.
That's that point, which is like the role of government is not to take your money away from you and then give it to a program that you should be donating to. It's, hey, this is a program. This is a solution. It's not our program. It's not our solution. But like, if you support it, they are doing good work to help resolve this problem. I love that, as opposed to like, give me your money because I'm going to do what you should be doing.
People often say, oh, conservatives they're unchristian. They don't take care of other people. They're so selfish. They want to keep all their money. And
Do they say that?
No, people say that all the time. They'll say, "Oh,
is that a thing?"
No, the other side will say that. They'll say, "Oh, they're the business, they're the rich," but I think that actually it's been proven false. If you read, let me think, who is it? The happiness guy from Harvard that teaches the happiness classes. He used to write on that. But
the last lecturer guy.
Nope.
No,
different.
Because he does. You know what I'm talking about? The guy who
I do know who you're talking about too. That's the red book.
Guy.
This is a different guy. Okay. Bold, nice suit.
They're both happy.
Okay. Yeah. Anyways,
was happy.
I don't think that's the case. What we don't believe as conservatives is that I should tell you where you need to put your money and what cause you need to believe in. We want everyone to be a Christian and no, we don't want everyone to be a Christian. We want everyone to be service-oriented and be willing to take care of your communities, but on your own volition. And you choose where you want to spend your money and whether you love taking care of the children and want to help at the diaper bank, or whether your interest is the geriatric population and you want to, help take care of the elderly. Gotcha. You can choose. And the government's not going to make a better decision than you are with your hard-earned money.
Yeah, a very dear friend of mine, Dave, we had this discussion. I think it was like 2017. It was a while ago. Mm-hmm. And it was before that. It was right around when Obamacare came out. Okay. And I remember discussing these things with him, and he had a daughter who had leukemia as like a 1-year-old, right? And she's recovered. She's fantastic, like 100% good to go. And I always thought that Dave would like Obamacare because it prevented people from getting kicked off of insurance for pre-existing conditions. Like, well, your daughter started out with like a really rough roll of the dice, and like she's good now, but like this could be a problem later on in getting insurance. And he outlined the ethical problem of forcing moral action on people. It's like, look, if I'm walking through the desert and I see some guy who's dying and I hand him like a bottle of water and a sandwich and I save his life, he gets the benefit of surviving. I get the benefit of saving his life. Like, we both benefit, right? And we have a connection and we move on, and like that's society. He's like, the problem is now I'm walking through the desert, or I'm just walking down the street and somebody with a gun comes up to my head and says, there's somebody in a desert who's dying. Give me your sandwich and water bottle. And you're like, but they're like, give it to me. Yeah. They take the sandwich and water bottle and it robs you of your free will of moral action. And I thought that was a really interesting perspective. He's like, yeah, because they gave it to the guy maybe. Now, by the way, the guy transporting it, he took a little bite of the sandwich and he took a drink of the water, and then he got the remainder to that guy. But that guy never met you. You never met him. You never understood 100% what was going on, and you never even had the capacity to engage in this type of giving. And he's like, and it just screws up everything. And I was like, God, man, that's an astute point.
Smart guy. I like it. And when you do something for someone else, it lifts the person that gave more than the person that received often. And it builds strong communities. And, everyone lives on a street with neighbors and people that are in need, and we can help each other. But for example, there's a lady that lives on my street and she's a single mom, and I know of a neighbor who takes dinner to her every night. Or not every night, once a week.
Sure.
But she just says, one night you get off, just enjoy doing homework with your kids and doing your thing. A lady on the block she just makes twice as much dinner that night and takes care of this single mom. That's 100 times better at building community and taking care of people than a government program that tells someone this person needs help and you're assigned to pay for the help and all of the things that happen. And the same thing happens. I mean, there's carpools happening. If we would just talk to our neighbors and help everyone. No matter what street you live on, there is someone there that you can help, and there's probably someone that can help you. Yeah. And that's a lot better.
One question, because you're on JFAC and I want to talk to you about that. When you were talking about rising crime, I was actually speaking with Lori Wolf yesterday, and we were talking about law enforcement, and there is, I believe, statewide a decrease of crime by like 17%, and violent crime, which is a big one, right? That's down like some order of magnitude, like 5x or something. So is there an increase in more like urbanized crime in Boise that you feel like people are experiencing?
So crime is a really hard thing to measure because it depends what you're looking at. Are you looking at offenses? Are you looking at convictions? Are you looking at people that were catch and release? Are you looking at there's just so much nuance to the statistics around crime. But I can tell you from talking to the people in my district, they are scared to death about the crime that's increasing, and it's all anecdotal. It's what they see in their neighborhoods and in their parks. And I'll give you one example of that. I did a meet and greet at DeMeyer Park, and it's it was there when I was a kid. We used to float down the canal in the summer and climb the trees. Well, it's just a park in a nice neighborhood in a nice area in West Boise.
Sure.
And I was there at the park meeting lots of the neighbors that lived there during the campaign. And they showed me pictures of the restrooms, and that graffiti had been pushed all over the walls. Sure. And these people, a lot of them, that's kind of a neighborhood that's kind of behind the old HP or the new Shinden campus. They've lived there for 25 years. They've raised their families there, probably 40 years actually. And they've never seen anything like this. And now they see graffiti written all over the bathroom in their park. And they are scared to death that there's Venezuelan gangs in their neighborhood. They're afraid of immigration. They're afraid of there's drug deals going on in their park. And so what they're seeing is graffiti, which I guarantee you there was no graffiti in that park 20 years ago. So to them, crime has increased and they're scared to death. They do not want that to happen to their community. They've raised their families here. They want their kids to come home and raise their families in a nice, safe place like Boise.
So it sounds like you're saying that people are like, look, we see this soft indicator, and we think this soft indicator, paves the way for these other problems. And I mean, like the Venezuelan gangs, it's not hilarious at all, but it's like everybody sees Venezuelan gang members.
Yes.
It's like, how many people are coming out of Venezuela? And like, how many gangs exist? And again, it's been.
And I should probably correct that just so everyone knows. That's what my that's what anyone
that's what they're
thinks.
worried about. Yeah.
I sent the pictures to Sheriff Clifford and said, "Can you help me with this?" And he said, "This looks." Just looking at it from the pictures on my phone, he says, this looks like mimicking. So I don't want to frighten anyone overwhelmingly, but 100%. Still, it's illegal to write graffiti on the park bathrooms. That's 100% crime. And that's bad.
A stat from Sheriff Clifford as well, just to tag on to that, is that we actually have fewer illegal immigrants moving through the Ada County jail system, right? And it was hilarious. I had this conversation with him, and I put up one of the clips. People are like, that's because the prosecutors aren't prosecuting illegal immigrants that commit crimes. I'm like, I don't think the prosecutor, Jan Bennett, is like, who's this very conservative woman, is like easing off of prosecute anyway. But
jurisdiction. It's jurisdiction. It's just not her. She would prosecute them for the whatever they were picked up for, but then they're turned over. The immigration's not a state crime. I mean, they would be moved. They would maybe be detained in the Ada County jail, but then they'd be turned over to like Department of Homeland Security agent for
which Ada County,
so it's not Jan either.
Yeah, no, and I understand that completely. But the point is that one metric we have to gauge this is a decrease in people moving through illegal immigrants moving through our jail system. So that's an important thing. JFAC. Now, JFAC is like the hub of every day of the legislative session. Explain this to me.
Right. So it's where the money goes. And I'm super excited to be on it. I'm new at this, so I'm learning every day a lot more about JFAC, but it's great. When I served in the House before, I served on education and business committees, which I felt like I had a lot of experience in because I'm a small business owner and I've worked a lot in the schools. JFAC is the one that it stands for Joint Finance and Appropriations Committee, and it's 10 senators and 10 House members, and we meet together every morning. And essentially, we set the budgets for all of the agencies, and whether it's $6.3 or $6.4 billion that we're spending of Idaho general fund money, we decide how to appropriate that.
Okay. So where do all the proposed numbers come from the governor's budget? Because he proposes a budget where he's like, let's put this money here and this money here and this money here. And then people testify on like, or they at least tell him like, this is why we want the money. And then he brings it down. And then there's like a defense of the budget, right? Like it's this whole big process. But again, like when you guys are making your decisions, how are you determining, okay, we need to allot $100 million to ISP, or they're asking for $110 million and we only want to give them $100 million. Like how do you make those determinations?
So I'll preface this again by saying that I'm new. So if any of the chairmen or people that are more experienced on JFAC want to correct me, they're probably right. But essentially, we do get the governor's recommendations. We also have our own legislative staff that works year round. And people always say the Idaho legislature has no staff. And when I was in the House, I would say that was accurate. But we do have a budget staff that works closely with the JFAC team. And they are phenomenal. They are smart. They are hard workers. And they also advise us and have all of the budgets. So we have that information as well. The governor's recommendations and the agency recommendations are generally close. I was part of an EROC committee, which met before the session started. And
what's an EROC committee?
Okay. So I didn't know either. It was new to me. I'm about 2 weeks ahead of you on this one, okay?
Awesome. I feel like we're jiving on this. Like, no idea what's happening.
We're learning. I really am learning every day more and more. But it's the Economic Outlook Committee. And
Gotcha.
so they brought in experts and they testified in front of us and told us this is what the tax commission thinks the numbers
You
are
had
gonna
the
do.
ag economist, Brett Wilder, on, I think.
Several, yeah.
You're like, yeah, probably.
Several people. U of I
Yeah.
came in, yes. And there was
I had
a
interviewed
banker,
him.
there was a business, Micron came in. You know, these are people, which I have to say, it's nice to hear from the business community. Government I own a small business and I work in government, and it is two totally different animals. But it was nice to hear. We had economists come in and present to us, and our LSO staff also presented to us different numbers, projections, and we decide based on those numbers. Kind of, we make predictions, and I'm low, other people are high. We come together, we compromise, we try.
Right.
In the end, it's a projection. It's an economic projection, and anything could happen. So.
Gotcha.
Anyway.
Now, you were saying right when you came in, you were like, oh, JFAC's in like gridlock this morning. What happened this morning? Like what's being argued over?
Well, so right now we're setting some important numbers, and a couple of them we got through. So so our budget grows every year.
Yes.
And that makes sense because there's inflation, 3% inflation. So
At
if
least,
we're just going to pay for toilet paper for our employees, our budget's going to go up. And some of those are really standard costs, like contract inflation, like the Department of Admin all has, let's say, Microsoft licenses so they can use Word or Excel. Contracts inflate, rent increases, all of those things. So we have to set budgets based on, like, did the amount of the contract go up? We also have to set a budget based on, did health insurance for state employees go up? And it tends to go up about $1,000 every year for the health benefit for each state employee. And then we also will agree on a budget that one has to do with transfers. And then the fourth one, which is the one that's kind of a challenge right now, is it's called CEC, but for most people, it's a cost of living adjustment, and it's setting salaries for statewide. And so some people want to do 1%, some people want to do $1 raise. There's lots of ways to look at how do we take care of our employees who in the state, who inflation has happened to them too, and every year their salary needs to be looked at. And if we don't look at their salary, then they actually got a pay cut.
Yeah,
I say this all the time. People don't like the size of government growing, and I'm a limited government person. I understand that too. But as a business owner, I can't just hire employees at one rate and never pay them anymore because inflation has been a beast. Right. And we will lose them, and it's as expensive to retain employees. So there is something that, just in general, a 3% cost of living allowance, anyone in their right mind would generally agree that most people deserve that every year.
Again, I apologize. There was a huge snafu over an increase in salary for the elected officials, like the legislators, senators, and representatives. Did JFAC make a decision? Like, who determines that?
So interesting. Not me.
Not me. It's not me.
I love to say that. It's not the legislature, and that is by design. So there's a separate committee that is not elected that sets our pay rates, and they don't do it every year. They don't do like 3% every year, but they change our pay rates, and it's great. You don't want the legislature involved
giving
in setting
themselves their own raises. Sure.
So it's a good plan.
Wait, so who is that board appointed? Is that committee appointed?
Yeah. And it's got good, smart people on it. I know a couple of them. They run big businesses. They're well entrenched in our community. They know exactly what's going on. And I think the big idea on the pay raise, and again, like, I really shouldn't have to weigh in on it at all, and you don't want me to. I shouldn't have to be part of this discussion. Now, politics may happen, and I might have to be, but I'll say the main thing that people are looking at, and I see this happen over and over in government, is people are so concerned about one thing that they're missing all the other tools around them. And there obviously can be a case made for moving our salary from $17,000 to, 18,000 to 23, something like that. Right. There's a case for that, definitely. But I think we have to look at what is the problem that we're really solving. Are we trying to get more people involved in politics? Are we trying to make it so that it's someone? I think sometimes we don't look at the real problem. I don't think there's a problem with legislator pay. No one does this job for the 17 or 18,000 that we get. It's
Sure.
just not that. It's not a pay issue. It's something else is driving it.
Gotcha.
So.
Listen, I know it's a working day. I'm sensitive to your time.
Yeah.
We've talked about a smattering of things. Hopefully, first of many. Do you have anything you want to say here at the end? I want to make sure you get back on time.
Thank you. You know what? I just want to say that I appreciate the feedback I'm getting. I've done a couple of forums with my district, and we get a lot of feedback at the Capitol, and we look at it. We care about what people have to say. I believe this is a representative republic, and the people in my district, the majority of them elected me because I can make good decisions, but I make good decisions when I have good information. And that oftentimes means talking to people with boots on the ground, and those are my constituents. So I just encourage people.
Coming.
Yeah. We read it all. We don't do everything that everyone wants. That's impossible. But we do listen, and that helps us craft the best decisions. So
awesome. Well, thank you for what you're doing. Thanks for coming in today, and let's do it again.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.